Tonight, we journey into the story of Korea. You might struggle to endure what they once lived through. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know in the comments, where are you listening from? And what time is it for you right now? Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You stand at a shore where the tide moves in slow breaths. The water folds over sand and slides back, leaving a silver rind that catches the moon. Far beyond the breakers, lights bob where night fishing has begun. Their hum reaches you like a lullaby. Behind you, the land rises, ridge after ridge, a mountain spine that holds the peninsula steady. You feel how sea and mountain teach a single lesson about endurance. Rivers carry that lesson to the coast. The Han runs broad through a basin where reeds bend and cranes stand patient. The Nakdong curls through the south with a many-fingered mouth. The Jim and Yongsan move quietly through lowlands. Along these banks you trace faint paths where feet once eased the ground. Shell middens raise low humps. Blackened hearths still hold stones that warmed morning meals. Cord marks press a soft pattern that holds the memory of hands. The first roofs keep low to the soil. Earthen floors stay warm under woven mats. Rain softens the world into one voice. Nets dry on pegs. Fish gleam like coins. Children run along embankments and leave a braid of tracks. The sea gives and takes, and people learn how to meet it with respectful rhythm. They gather shellfish in quiet rows and time their steps with the moon. You walk inland where the land becomes stone and then sky. On a rounded summit, an altar of piled rock waits for sunrise. The wind carries a flavor like iron. Here, day once began with offerings. Bowls of grain lifted, cups of clear water raised, bodies turned to greet the east and then the west. You place your palm on the stones. Flecks of charcoal whisper under your hand. The world feels near and attentive. Down in the valleys, a different warmth grows. Around the middle of the second millennium before the Common Era, rice begins to settle into the southern lowlands. Water is held by reed mats and earthen ridges. Seedlings take root. The work is steady and social. People move in lines, hand to hand, basket to basket. When the dike holds, a new kind of quiet appears, the quiet of planned time. You hear clappers marking a turn in the season. Egrets come down like folded linen. Fields shine with a living order. Across fields and coves, the earth lifts itself into tables of stone. Dolmens rest on squat feet and carry heavy lids with a gravity that feels kind. They stand in clusters over hills and in rows near water. Some keep bones and beads and blades. Some keep only space. Lichen writes slow script across their faces. You run your fingers along a cold edge and feel the resolve of many hands. The stones make a promise without words. Remember the living. Honor the dead. Keep watch as time turns. A gleam enters the story. Bronze comes by sea and by step roots from far plains. The first time a new knife sits in a palm, it sends a small chill through the skin. Mirrors catch the sky and bend it into something a person can carry. Bells give a clean note. The metal brings a method as well as a shine. Gifts tie followers to leaders. Rituals gain new texture. A bracelet leaves a faint green ring where it rested. You listen as the world learns a brighter sound. Walled towns rise where river narrows and road bends favor a gate. Palisades climb the ridges. Earthen ramparts hold the hill. Granaries lift on legs. Inside these walls, courtyards collect light. A potter turns a wheel by steady habit. Night fires ring the market and show the faces of traders whose journeys reach the salt edge of distant seas. Along the northern rivers, the land grows severe and grand. Winter makes a clean sound against stone. Caverns open where water wrote slow sentences. In that darkness, future walls will carry images of riders and dancers and hunters who move with the confidence of those who belong. You feel their approach and hear your own breath becoming calm. The story of first rule comes near with the weight of a name. A child of heaven walks down from a high mountain to build a capital where forested peaks meet flowing water. A city faces sunrise and moonrise with equal respect. That founding becomes a way to carry hardship. It gives shape to courage. Years later, records will try to count the dates and fix the borders. The deeper truth remains in the posture of the land and in the customs of people who greet ancestors at dawn and keep thresholds clean. Toward evening, you pause beside a shallow bay. The surface is smooth as brushed silk. Eddies form and settle into a soft swirl, then calm again. Balance enters without effort. Bright and dark. Rest and movement. Sky and earth. Even before symbols find their final form, the idea lives in the way a hearth sits opposite a door, in the way a roof ridge follows a cardinal line, in the way a village aligns its lanes so wind can pass like water. You stand still and feel a gentle order unfold. Some truths refuse to hurry. The first rice may have traveled along luminous coasts where tidal flats go out as far as a field of dreams. Or it may have followed rivers where traders moved with patient discipline. The earliest walled town may have grown near a northern bend or under a southern ridge that captured winter sun. The first bronze may have been poured in a quiet valley or on a shelf above a small harbor. The earth keeps its counsel. It waits for careful hands. Night gathers over the coast. Boats angle home with their nets. Wood smoke draws lines across the sky. Somewhere a single bell rings from a house with no name. You stand inside these beginnings and let them surround you like a cloak. You feel a promise take shape. Not loud, not sudden, steady and old. You breathe with it. You carry it forward. You follow the river toward a gate set on a low hill where walls hold the slope like calm hands. Timber stakes rise in close ranks. Earth is tamped into a breastwork that curves with the line of the ridge. A ditch glints with rainwater. Within these walls, the air smells of millet porridge and smoke from pine. Dogs doze at thresholds. A drum keeps a soft pulse from the council yard, a rhythm that steadies breath and thought. On a packed courtyard, a smith lifts a crucible from the coals. The metal inside turns the color of ripe apricot. He tips the pour into a clay mold. A thin flame kisses the lip of the channel, then recedes. When the mold opens, a dagger rests on the bench like a leaf of evening light. Its shape suggests a stringed instrument. The handle swells, narrows, and flares. The edge is patient and exact. You watch as the blade is polished with ash and oil until it keeps the sky in its skin. This new glow enters daily life and ceremony together. It binds companions at feasts. It seals oaths in quiet rooms where faces move only a little and words are kept short. Mirrors come to sit beside the daggers. Their backs carry patterns of sun and thunder. When a mirror meets the morning, a coin of light slides over the wall, then rests on a bale of millet. A woman traces the pattern with her finger and hums a tune that her grandmother knew. Bells shaped for ritual deliver a single clear note that seems to move through the chest rather than the air. The sound gathers people at the foot of an altar. Bowls fill with grain, cups fill with rice ale. Breath slows until the day feels measured by the sound alone. Trade follows the river and the grass sees beyond. Riders arrive with felt hats and leather ties and the smell of horses on their clothes. They bring furs and sturdy bows and stories of winter moons that had hang for a long time in a hard blue sky. They leave with salt from tidal flats, dried fish from the south wind, and polished stone beads that shine like deep water. A few move on toward other shores. A few stay and teach children how to knot a bridle or fit a bit. Steppe wind and coastal mist learn to share the same lane. A name begins to gather weight over these towns and hills. Goguryeo settles across the tongue like a vow. The word travels in the mouths of traders and in the shouted greetings of gatekeepers who open for visitors at dawn. A capital is said to stand where rivers meet and mountains hold a northern horizon. Some swear it rests under a black pine ridge near a broad bend where cranes visit each spring. Others speak of a site farther west where stone breaks into terraced shelves and the ground keeps flecks of bronze in its memory. You listen to both stories as if they were two reeds that hold the same water. Law arrives as a way to hold the peace of the market and the trust of the field. On a day without wind, the elders gather under a canopy and speak rules that are short and firm. Kill, and you will not live. Wound, and you will make the injured whole with grain from your own store. Steal, and you will serve in bondage to repay the wrong. The words feel heavy as river stones. Time adds more restraints, and the list grows longer, like a fence built higher after wolves pass too near the sheep. You feel how order enters the body through shared attention, through the knowledge that everyone hears the same sentences in the same order. The gate town keeps granaries on stilts. Their floors stay dry when summer storms arrive from the south. Guards check the scales with small bars that match the thickness of a finger. The measure finds fairness in the open. Cloth is folded by the number of handspans. Grain is counted by the lift of a basket. Salt is weighed by the settling of powder in a cup. A boy learns the feel of right balance as he watches the beam come level and rest. At the edge of the town, a low shrine burns clean pine. A tiger tail banner lifts on a quiet breath of wind. Beside it, a bear banner holds a darker calm. The two animals stand as paired teachers. Strength that moves in a flash sits beside endurance that holds through seasons. Women place cords and beads at the foot of the post, asking for steady growth of children and good harvest rain. Men bring knives made dull by labor and touch them to the smoke for luck. You bow and let the scent pass through your hair. Not far from the walls, a tomb field spreads along a soft ridge. Dolmens lean like old shoulders. Newer graves keep clay vessels tucked near the head, and a mirror sits where it gives light to a face that no longer needs dawn. The silence there holds footsteps with care. In one grave, a dagger lies beside a small bell. You imagine the bell lifted by a hand that once guided a feast or a rite. You imagine that hand working a field in late summer, moving slowly to keep pace with heat. Both gestures live together in the single artifact. Seasons turn, and iron begins to appear in the markets. It is duller than bronze when new, but it keeps a bite through longer work. A plow tooth lasts the span of a harvest. A spear point shapes how men stand on a wall. The change moves with little ceremony. It simply endures, and by enduring, it persuades. Bronze does not vanish. It becomes the color of rank and the sound of prayer. Iron takes the burden of labor and the quickness of defense. You follow a caravan north along a river that runs shallow in late summer. The banks are painted with reeds and willow. Herons step like dignitaries across a stage. At a ford, the road shows grooves worn by years of wheels and hooves. The caravan leader touches a carved tally, then nods toward a fort on the far bank. The fort was built by hands that learned from steppe riders and from townsmen who know the value of a night without alarms. The gate opens with a slow creak. The smell of cooked barley moves through the arch. The journey pauses inside a circle of protection that feels earned. Voices rise in the council yard at dusk. Some speak of moving the center of rule to where trade now thickens. Others argue for the mountain seat that holds old shrines and older stories. A thin moon leans above the ridge. Sparks rise from the brazier and vanish as if they were small notes climbing a scale. You sense that the center of a people is not always a point on a map. Sometimes it is a habit of gathering at dawn to share porridge and law. Sometimes it is the memory of a founder who taught respect for the sunrise and the river. Night deepens. The drummer returns to the pulse that first met you at the gate. It matches something inside the chest and steadies it. Beyond the walls, the fields rest. Beyond the fields, the roads stretch toward other towns with other drums. The bronze stays warm from the hands that held it. The mirror keeps the last light a moment longer than the sky. You walk out under the stars knowing that a name has taken root and that its branches will soon touch other valleys and other seas. You follow a ridge where dawn rinses the pines, and 3 banners rise in the cool air. One holds a mountain in its quiet posture. One carries a river's long curve. One gleams like a crown set with dew. Valleys answer with horns and drums. Messengers ride between gates. The peninsula breathes in 3 measures and learns a rhythm that keeps distance and closeness in patient accord. You listen to the land count time in the crackle of frost, in oxen turning wet fields, in the hush that visits roofs before sunrise. You step into a northern stronghold where walls run like a stone tide over a spur above a river. In painted tombs nearby, horses lift their knees with pride, and hunters lean from saddles to loose arrows that hum like bees. Dancers wheel in silk that looks almost wet in lamplight. The rooms keep the scent of earth and pine soot. Here, the northern realm grows tall by holding passes and riding deep into cedar hills. In the early 5th century, a ruler called Goguryeo pushes borders toward broad coasts and forested valleys, and the echo of his rides lingers in the cold air that pours from the mountains at dusk. You drift west to a country of soft hills and braided waterways. The capital sits first on a high bank and later moves to a gentler basin where lotus ponds mirror eaves that tilt like the corners of a smile. Art prefers a hush. Roof tiles end in lotus pods. Brick pagodas rise in measured tiers. A bronze incense burner lifts a mountain on the back of a graceful creature, while smoke threads from small windows like breath from hidden hermit huts. The court shifts to Sabi in the year 538, and the new avenues learn the easy grammar of water and light. You turn south and east to a fortress set on granite. Gates fold inward toward a town that rests in careful grids under the watch of bell and drum. People study a way of ranks that governs marriage and dress and the seating at rites. Youths gather in groves to train with sword and bow and to sing under the moon, calling one another to honor and courtesy. After rain, the quartz in the granite answers with a pale shimmer that calms the eye. In such places, a small kingdom learns how patience and discipline can wear the shape of stone. A path of faith reaches the north first during a dry, bright winter. A monk arrives with scrolls and images and sets a bell that sounds like a long breath. The western court welcomes another messenger and raises halls where lotus and cloud share the same roof. In the southern court, the old rites hold until a courtier named Ikadon offers his life in the year 527, and the white color of his blood turns dispute into acceptance. The new teaching moves quietly along colonnades and village lanes, a river of sound and incense joining the older springs of the land. Iron from the Gaia valleys moves through markets like a steady song. Forges turn out tools that meet stubborn soil and blades that keep the passes clean. Traders shape routes that run along rivers and down coasts, a braided cord linking mountains to harbors. Smiths exchange billets and news with riders from the north and sailors from the islands. In market squares, the smell of brine folds into the smell of charcoal. Baskets of salt sit beside stacks of pig iron. Pine smoke rises in blue sheets that soften edges and temper voices. The three courts watch one another through valley mists. Envoys leave at dawn with lacquered tablets and return with silks and promises that bend like reeds in wind. One season a pact grows between west and south. Another season riders from the north test a pass and the border gives with the faint sound of thin ice. Fortresses stand in strings along ridgelines, each linked by beacon fires and by runners who carry sentences between one heartbeat and the next. In quiet hours, artisans press cloud patterns into coffin lids, as if the dead would sleep under a painted sky. Music takes different flavors in each land. The north favors bold horns and a heavy drum that answers the terraces of stone. The west loves plucked strings and thin flutes that spiral upward like swallows at dusk. The south folds both into a court sound that can be stern and tender. Dancers in the west keep sleeves that move like water. Dancers in the south step with heels that ring on bronze mirrors. At festivals, you taste rice cakes steamed in pine needles and breathe the sweet tang of ripened persimmon, and the night seems to hold its own slow metronome above the roofs. On a winter evening, you stand near a border fort and count the layers of wall and ditch that guard a pass. Men mend armor by lamplight. Women carry porridge to the watch. Sparrows roost in the eaves, their small bodies warming the wood. A commander studies a map that is more memory than paper, because hills are known by the weight they put in the feet. He sends 2 small bands into fog while the main line waits for a bell. Night lowers. The ridge disappears, then returns when bronze lips release a single long note that gathers scattered wills into one quiet motion. A quarrel set in stone lives long after the horns go still. A tall stele in the north speaks of enemies that came over the sea and towns that yielded and towns that held. The strokes offer more than one path for the mind to follow. Across the water, old halls guard their own records in a different light. The space between these memories never quite closes, and the stone stands through snow and sun with the same composure, letting the future listen and choose which echo to keep. In the southern capital, a gold crown rests in a dark storehouse. Branches reach upward like the points of a sacred tree. Curved jades hang like green commas that mark a pause rather than an end. When the crown meets lamplight, it looks like dawn caught in metal, and the air seems to cool around it. Outside, near a low hill, an observatory of rounded stones rises under Queen Seondeok, and attendants measure the wandering of planets and the wink of stars. The calm tower turns the sky into a page that can be read with patience. At the western court, painters lay gentle color over silk and wood. Faces turn slightly, as if listening for a message carried by a crane. Carpenters set roof beams to meet at a clean angle that holds a quiet sigh. Ceremony becomes a language of sleeves and steps. The river around the capital moves with slow confidence, and barges pass under bridges that appear to float. Poetry learns to speak in light strokes, and words brush the mind like water on inkstone. Strength puts on a soft robe without losing its steadiness. The north still rides at dawn. Scouts move without sound through birch and larch. Villages compare the spray of frost on windows to the spray of arrows that sometimes falls from ridges above. Names of passes pass from mouth to mouth like charms. When the first thaw comes, rivers carry broken ice to the sea and also carry news. A tower held, a gate burned, a chieftain bowed, a daughter married into a rival house to buy a season of rest. The land memorizes each detail without anger and without haste. Through these years, the people keep ordinary vows. Farmers plant between stones to collect warmth for the night. Weavers count threads so cloth holds the body's shape without clinging too much. Carpenters rub beams until their skin shines, then fit them into frames with joints that greet like palm to palm. In courtyards, monks teach children to breathe in patterns that steady the chest. In fields, shamans tie bright ribbons to birch twigs and ask the wind to carry wishes toward the hills where the ancestors listen. By the time spring returns again, the three kingdoms have learned one another so well that each can read the other's first motion by the smell of the first wind. Rivalry refines art and strategy. Faith teaches courts to raise tall halls and to listen for small notes of conscience. The land keeps score without speaking. You stand at the ridge and hear the drumbeat that once counted 3 begin to hesitate as if searching for a path that leads toward 1. You move north where the wind tastes of resin and iron, and the land breaks into shelves of granite that seem to breathe with the pines. A river runs hard and clear between black stones. High above it, a wall rides the spine of a ridge and then slips down to a gate where watchfires leave a faint honey smell in the cold. Hooves stamp in the yard. Harness bells answer with a small silver tremor. You feel a kingdom measure itself by passes, by the depth of a ditch, by the time it takes a rider to vanish into larch and cloud. Cavern tombs open in the hills not far from the fortress. You enter with a lantern, and the air holds a clean chill. On plastered walls, a hunt unfolds. Riders twist at the waist and send arrows from composite bows that bend like swans. Deer leap with slender legs that blur into motion. A musician keeps a zither in her lap, and 2 dancers turn with sleeves that float like river foam. In the ceiling corners, 4 guardians wait with calm faces. A blue dragon looks east. A white tiger stares toward the west. A red bird spreads long tail feathers that ripple like flame. A dark tortoise coils with a serpent and keeps the north quiet. Their color has faded, yet the calm remains. You cross a river where ice edges the stones. The banks rise into terraces cut for a mountain city. Builders stitch wood and stone into bastions that face both steppe and sea. In a storehouse, men rub oil into lamellar plates until they move like scales without sound. A captain runs a finger along a bowstring and listens to the soft note it gives the dark. He speaks of winter raids that reach far into cedar valleys and return with the first thaw. He speaks of spring drives when the passes open and pasture calls. You stand in the yard as horses breathe cloud and stamp the earth into something like rhythm. A tall stone near the river carries lines that shine when frost melts. A son set it up in the year 414 to honor a father whose name still rides the cold air. Under that reign, borders ran wide into forest and coast. Towns lowered their banners and then raised them again under a new promise of order. The stone remembers campaigns and river crossings, and boats hauled over shallows with ropes that cut the palms. Riders move inside the words with a confidence that still feels warm. The stele holds more than one path for the mind. Some read a sea-born enemy in its strokes, others find a different shape in the same marks, and the surface accepts both readings without complaint. You leave the stone and follow a file of horses up a slope that becomes a table of rock. The wind opens and closes like a door. From here, the world spreads toward plains that give little shelter and toward valleys that fold like cloth. Scouts mark lines on the land that maps never quite capture. A ring of watch mounds links hill to hill with signals. At dusk, a brazier lifts a bead of light. Then another answers, and the ridge becomes a quiet necklace. In the years that follow, a prince guides the court south to a new seat that looks out over wide water and gentle terraces. You enter that city and feel a different breath in its stone. Gates rise with a steady grace. Streets run straight until they meet the curve of a low hill. In the palace quarter, eaves lift as if to taste rain. Halls open toward gardens where bamboo knocks in the wind like calm knuckles on a wooden door. The move brings fields closer, brings trade closer, brings the sea's long road within reach. It also brings the capital nearer to rivals who already read the river mouths as their own. The change settles into the stones, and the stones hold it without anxiety. On the coast, a shipyard wakes before the sun. Frames of vessels rest on cradles like ribs ready for life. Tar warms in clay pots. Planks meet edge to edge with pegs that bite clean. Men wrap rope around a capstan and sing in a low register that suits the hour. These ships run along bays and headlands, carrying iron and grain and news. They also carry riders who need to land where a road ends in sand. The frontier opens not only across mountains, but also across water that looks harmless in light and heavy after dark. You visit a village where winter stays long. Floors warm from hidden flues. A low table holds bowls of soup that smell of garlic and fern shoots. Outside, women hang fish in rows that glitter as they dry. And snow gives off the soft sound of threshing when it shifts on a roof. Children practice with short bows at a straw target and count their arrows in even tones. A man ties a small emblem to the lintel above the door. The emblem keeps a bird with 3 legs whose body carries the shape of the sun. Its black surface remembers heat. Its eye holds a pinpoint of gold leaf. The figure watches the threshold the way a hearth watches a room. On a broad plain beyond the hills, you hear the murmur of an army settling into camp. Tents rise in measured squares. Spears rest with shafts crossed so that they do not chatter in the night wind. A drum keeps time for pulses and for sleep. In the morning, a wave of cavalry rolls forward over frozen grass. Hoofbeats strike a single note. Light rides the edges of helmets. The riders carry their weight high and spare. When they pass a low stone with a carved swirl, each lifts a finger toward the mark. The gesture takes no time. It says that motion depends on stillness kept in the chest. Seasons turn. New courts to the west test the borders. Envoys arrive with silks and compliments that carry a little iron in the thread. Forts rise again on old foundations. A mountain city, once called Huando, stands like a clenched fist above a bend in the river. You walk its lanes and watch rain darken the stones until they gleam. The smell of wet pine becomes tender. A single bell calls men to the wall. They go without haste. When the storm lifts, cranes circle the slope and then drift away toward the marsh. Years later, a road of packed earth draws a monarch from the west toward a stone gate that stands over a river plain. Catapults thump. Arrows climb into smoke. Walls give and hold by turns. Inside the city, a quiet commander measures the hours with a cup of water and a handful of pebbles. And the garrison moves with his patience. When the army outside breaks camp at last and the fields grow green again, the gate keeps its scars like an old veteran who still sits straight and breathes steady. The story settles into the dust where carts pass for market and leave a faint sweetness. Through all this, the tombs continue to receive their guests. You return to the cool chambers and let your eyes adjust. In one, a pair on horseback turns toward each other as if to share a word. A sleeve lifts and falls, and the gesture creates a silence that feels like snow. A small dog looks up from the corner with trusting eyes. The painted world holds movement and rest in a single breath. The people outside keep living with the same balance. They ride. They farm. They mend harness. They boil buckwheat and wild greens in iron pots that are black and clean. Scholars and builders leave records that speak with precision and with hint. Borders reach a certain river and then skip to a line of hills in another hand. A court title means general in one season and guardian in the next. The tomb of a lord carries a name that can be read as a foreign guest or as a local ally who kept 2 languages in a single mouth. The stones answer every reading with the same quiet. You stand between forest and wall and feel how a frontier is sometimes a road rather than a fence. When night returns, the mountain wind steadies. A horse crops the frosted grass and breathes into your sleeve. Far off, beacon mounds pulse once and then go still. The four guardians keep watch over sleeping hills. The three-legged bird waits over the lintel and does not tire. You walk down from the ridge with the slow confidence of those riders in paint and dust. The path glows a little under moonlight. The world hums like a bowstring that has just been plucked and now rests ready. You walk east along a river whose stones shine like soft coins, and the sound of a bronze bell spreads through the valley with a low round note. The hills fold inward and reveal a capital that sits in clean lattices of streets and canals. Roofs tilt like calm eyebrows. Gardens keep pines that lean a little in the afternoon wind. You enter Gyeongju while the light turns honey-colored and the city answers with the rhythm of sandals on wood, pestles in mortars, and drums that keep the hours for court and temple. A memory of hard years travels with the breeze. Armies once crossed the mountains and met on plains that now hold barley and beans. In the year 660, the Western Kingdom fell to a tide that paired Silla resolve with distant banners from the continent. 8 years later, the northern realm followed, and the peninsula drew into one body from the southern coasts to the river that keeps the colder air. The story turns once more in 676 when the same Silla banners face their former allies, and along fortresses near the Western Sea, the invaders are pushed back. The borders settle with a sigh that feels like the end of a long fever. You feel how quiet hardens into a foundation for grace. The new order lifts halls toward the sky. At Bulguksa, stone terraces step upward in gentle flights. Bridges of carved granite arc like moonbeams that have learned to carry footsteps. Beyond the courtyards, a grotto waits under a hill of solid rock. You pass through a stone passage and enter a round chamber that breathes coolness. Sokram keeps a seated figure whose gaze holds the weight of oceans, and around him, a company of bodhisattvas and guardians forms a soft ring. Each robe seems to move, though the room is still. The granite has been coaxed into folds that catch lantern light like ripples on a lake at evening. Chant rises and falls and leaves a clear silence in its wake. The city beyond the temple keeps a careful etiquette that flows from the bone rank. A garment hem announces a place in the order of things. The cut of a sleeve speaks without sound. Marriage paths turn with that quiet language. Offices rise as if climbing a stair that has been worn by many feet. A youth with a bright mind knows when to bow his head and when to lift it. The rules have edges, and those edges sometimes bite. Yet the steadiness they lend to the streets can be felt in the way traffic yields at gates and in the way courtyards remain free of dust. Artisans find a new patience in their hands. Kilns burn in valleys near the city, and the fired clay takes color like the underside of a cloud at dusk. Roof tiles end with lotus pods that cup rain for a breath before letting it go. Ink stones keep a sheen from constant touch, and brushes drink water from bowls that smell faintly of plum wood. A calligrapher lifts his wrist, lays down 3 strokes, and the character grows, then rests, like a crane folding its legs. Music rises in halls where zithers and flutes move together as if wind has learned to sing in 2 voices. The bell you heard in the valley belongs to a giant that waits under a pavilion. When the striker kisses its lip, the sound blooms slowly, then walks without hurry over rice stubble and waterways and city walls. People pause with ladles in the air and with tools in their hands. A mother sets a child on her hip and listens until the last shimmer fades. A storyteller near the south gate says the bell carries the sorrow of an old sacrifice, and that this sorrow makes the tone tender. The metal knows only that it was cast and lifted and given the work of calling, and it does that work with unfailing dignity. Trade follows the new calm. Caravans pour into markets with silk that smells of cedar chests, with glass that remembers fire, with books whose blocks of wood have tasted the bite of a sharp knife. Along the coasts, ports grow noisy with sails, and merchants praise a captain from the south whose ships learn the lanes between islands and continents better than birds learn the edges of wind. Pepper arrives like small suns wrapped in cloth. Fine paper arrives like winter water set into sheets. The city counts these arrivals with ledgers and with songs. You pause at a school that opens its doors to afternoon light. A master writes with slow care, and children echo the lines by murmuring. Confucian classics build a spine for public life. Buddhism tends the heart at dawn and dusk. The two meet in the same body with little quarrel, one teaching how to stand upright in duty, the other teaching how to let sorrow pass through as a traveler rather than a guest who refuses to leave. In village shrines, older voices still pour rice wine on the earth for ancestors and tie bright cloth to branches that move like prayer. The 9-story tower that once dominated the city square leaves only a foundation now. Its footprint sits like the print of a giant bird. Stones wait with their joints still smooth after storms. People stand at the edge and try to lift the vanished mass with imagination alone. Some minds see a height that could speak to clouds. Others see a design with broader shoulders and less peril in the wind. Carpenters who read old joinery patterns argue with the shape of their hands and the memory of wood. The truth stays folded in the lost timbers, and the foundation accepts every careful guess without complaint. At night, you return to Sokuram and sit in the cool chamber while crickets sing outside. The surfaces breathe light and shadow. The central figure seems to wait for your breath to calm before offering his own. The sculptors carved him in the 8th century under a patron who wished to honor parents and protect the nation. Yet the room feels older than any royal initiative. Some read the chamber as a stone mandala. Others read it as a mountain cut to reveal a still lake at its heart. Both readings bring the same quiet. You rest in that quiet and feel it travel beyond the grotto and through the hillside into the fields. In palace corridors, scribes record decrees that shape water and land. Dikes extend. Roads find straighter lines between towns. Way stations feed envoys who ride by moonlight to make the next bell. Taxation learns new wells of order and also new ways to weigh the backs of farmers. The system holds longer than anyone expects when the bells first ring in triumph. The same ranks that keep harmony can harden. The same wealth that builds temples can seek its own shadow. In the distance, you sense murmurs gathering. For now, the city keeps its composure and its lamps. You end the day on a hill where domed tombs rise like sleeping animals. Grass covers them in green that turns blue at twilight. Each mound keeps a chamber of wood fitted so well that the centuries cannot push it apart. These are the houses of kings and queens and of noble kin. A small offering sits on one low stone, a cup of rice wine, clear as morning light. The air smells of pine and early frost. Far away, the bell speaks again, and the city answers by inhaling and holding, then exhaling in one slow motion. You listen until the last shimmer disappears into the ground that unifies everything beneath your feet. You step into a colder light where reeds wear frost and birch trunks shine with a clean white gleam. Larch needles whisper under a sky like blown glass. In that breath, a northern court gathers the scattered, and you follow a road pressed firm into frozen loam, where ruts keep thin silver skins of ice. A wall of dressed stone crowns a hill that watches both river and inlet. The gate opens on a yard scented with horse tar and damp pine. Coats hold sable at the cuffs. Boots climb the calf. A clerk warms his brush over a brazier and writes the name Balhai, then lifts the board until the ink dulls in the cold. The word holds shore and mountain in one mouthful, as if tide and pass had made a single oath. 2 quiet stories live under the eaves and do not quarrel. One walks back to a commander of the old northern realm who gathered fugitives after a victory in a high pass late in the 7th century. Another leans toward forest clans who glide over snow on wooden boards and read winter wind like a map. The house that rises from their crossing learns the strengths of both rider and hunter. From the palace mound, the city shows its order. A straight avenue answers the 4 sides. Storehouses rise on stone to keep frost from the floor. A bell tower looks down on a market that smells of dried fish, pine smoke, leather, and ginseng. A scribe unrolls a calendar from a far imperial court and marks days for rites and embassies. Belts set with bright plaques catch light like shy stars. And the cadence of books guides voices without muting the older forest rhythm that beats in the chest. You walk to a port where gulls tack into steady wind and masts ring with light wooden music. Boats rest on blocks while men pack seams with oakum and warm tar until it flows like slow honey. Bales of ginseng stack in a neat wall and give the air a bitter freshness that clears the head. Bundles of sable and marten lie in rows soft as dusk. A drum calls the crew. A long hull slips from its cradle and kisses the tide. The captain bows toward a house on the quay that bears a lacquered plaque from an island court across the sea. Ropes creak. Sails fill. The ship turns its face toward the open water, like a pilgrim who knows the road. North of the harbor, a road climbs through birch, then opens onto tableland, where wind writes quick script in snow. Watch towers stand in a chain from ridge to ridge. Wooden tiles on a shrine click as the cold settles. A monk burns oil and lifts a small statue wrapped in linen. The face under the cloth is tender and strong. Bells and drums that once learned their echo in southern valleys now sound at home among pine, river, and hearth. Word spreads that the court keeps more than one seat. A northern capital sits near a lake that throws morning light like a shallow bowl. An eastern capital listens to surf and counts crane calls at dawn. A central capital guards river bends and upland farms where barley stays sweet through frost. Roads tie the five like cords of care, with milestones of granite that hold mica like frozen starlight. At way stations, cooks lift hot stones from coals and tuck them into straw pallets so travelers carry warmth into sleep. Scholars in red robes trace a map from mountain to sea. They write in characters learned from far capitals and teach boys to read by lamp smoke that rises in blue threads. Court music braids horns that remember the step with flutes that remember lotus. The seam does not show. In a back lane, a healer dries herbs that smell like autumn riverbanks and keeps drawers labeled in a steady hand. The drawers hold cures for frostbitten cheeks, strained backs, and the long sorrow that follows hard years. Where the soil gives easily after rain, horse burials lie under low mounds, and bits and stirrups turn up with a quiet shine. A tomb cut in stone keeps a mural where antlered deer leap in a spray of color that still glows. Another chamber holds painted clouds that look as if a dream painter studied the sky before dawn. The flakes show enough to teach how people here loved motion and balance and the clean line between earth and air. Caravans bring iron, salt, and glass. The court returns fur, timber, and roots that wake the tongue. Envoys travel winter roads toward a great river that runs brown under ice. Sleds move with a hush that feels like prayer. Tablets declare that the northern state keeps rights and law, opens granaries, guards borders, and honors parents. The far court replies with silk and calendars and a rank that makes titles real. On another road, a smaller party rides south, turns to the coast, and boards ships that find friendly quays where island officials step down with measured grace to greet them. You stand on the sea wall at dusk. The horizon sharpens to a fine line, exact and soft at once. Lanterns lift on ships like a small constellation learning to speak. Nets hang like wet veils and tick water into tubs. A child laughs at each drop. The sound promises that trade will return with dawn, no matter how far the riders roam inland. One clear fact steadies the chill. After the fall of the old northern realm, a leader named Dae Joyoung raised banners in this light and built a state that sent embassies with confidence to courts near and far. That choice leaves tracks you can still see in roads, tombs, and law. Yet some truths refuse a single shape. Some hear his lines stretching back to mountain riders. Others hear the deeper timbre of forest clans. The two songs meet and neither seeks to rule the other. The record keeps both in its quiet fold. Years turn. A storm gathers from the west in the early 10th century, made of neighbors who learned hard lessons on their own plains. Messengers carry news in even voices. A line of fire runs along the frontier, and the court prepares to bend and not to break. Citadels hold longer than markets. Ports yield first. The northern seat empties storehouses and sends families toward inland towns. A general sets his seal on a letter that orders a retreat to a river that has always been faithful. Snow levels the yard in a single pale sheet. The horses stamp, then stand still. The storm enters the palace quarter at last and leaves eaves scorched and streets rutted. Some flight turns south toward the peninsula. Some flows along rivers that do not know their names. Records grow thin, and the wind takes more than one page. You lift a scrap that says the court loved rights and music and law and cared for both old and young. You do not find the scrap that speaks the last hour in a full, clear voice. Questions remain like frost that lingers in shade. Was the first capital set by a lake, or did it stand farther south where soil keeps a memory of ash? How many families reached the peninsula and folded their names into villages, and how many stayed beside northern rivers that kept their accent? Which customs traced to riders and which to forest hunters? The land answers by holding both possibilities and asking you to keep your ear close. By night, the port wind smells of kelp again. A bell rings twice from a temple above the fish market. The sound smooths the air over nets and barrels. You look east and find a line where water meets sky. Somewhere beyond that line, a ship carries gifts and a letter that closes with a wish for fair weather and clear hearts. You listen until the surf slows your breath and the northern calm settles like a banked ember. You enter a capital between river and low mountain, and morning fog moves like silk over tiled roofs. Carts rattle on stone, hooves keep a measured trot, bells answer from monastery courtyards, and sleeves whisper along corridors. A banner lifts above the palace gate, and the name you carry is Goguryeo, a sound that keeps echo from older riders yet prefers gardens and law. A mariner who learned coasts as if they were script gathers allies and takes the throne in 918. He is remembered as a founder who trusts water to carry strength and leaves counsels for heirs that urge care for mountains and streams and kindness toward temples that teach calm. In a copying hall, the ink smells of pine smoke while clerks set those lines for another generation. The court shapes Goguryeo as a square that breathes. Streets run toward gates, then bend with canals. Scholars open schools that stitch old text into duty. Monks keep bells that steady the hours. Markets offer pears with a crisp snap and tea that warms the chest. Smiths edge blades. Weavers weigh silk by hand and listen for a fair measure when the scale rests. Pressure finds the borders. Riders from a northern empire cross a river in 993, and the land holds its breath. A minister named Seohui meets them with words tempered by learning and by memory of old claims to northern valleys. He speaks so that honor sits on both tables, and the riders withdraw. Storms return in 1010, and again in 1018. Near Gwiju, the army turns, and a general named Ganggam Chan guides a counterstroke that scatters an enemy already worn by winter roads. The wind that follows feels new. Forts rise along the northwest, where reeds and river braid many paths. Officers teach fresh drills. In 1107, a line of 9 fortresses pushes into ground that once felt safe to neighbors. The line does not last. It leaves courage and caution in equal measure. Patrols continue along marsh and hill, and the watch learns to read wind and hoofmark the way clerks read script. Calm returns to the kilns before it returns to the borders. In valleys near Gangjin and Buan, potters study fire until it becomes a language. Glazes settle the color of willow tea under thin ice. The skin of a vase reflects light like a pond at evening. Cranes circle a shoulder in pale inlay. A lotus opens on a cup with petals so fine they seem to float. The first inlaid pattern may have begun in one village beside a river, or it may have appeared at several kilns at once like dew on many leaves. Books gain bodies heavier than paper. In a mountain temple, halls hold printing blocks cut from dense wood that smells of rain. The blocks carry scripture letter by letter, thousands upon thousands. An older set once stood in a coastal storeroom and met fire during war. Monks and artisans answer by beginning again in 1236. For 15 winters and 15 summers, the blades bite and the blocks gather until the library hums like a hive at dusk. The pages go to Heinsa, where airy halls of wood keep them dry and cool. Artists refine devotion into craft. Scribes copy sutras on dark blue paper with lines of silver and gold, a night sky written with light. Painters give bodhisattvas faces that keep sorrow and mercy in the same gaze. Carvers set open-work lids on incense burners so that smoke writes clouds under beams. Court music blends horns that remember pasture with flutes that carry endings into courtyards. The road to the north remains restless. Clans in forests and riders on plains press and release. Messengers change horses at way stations where porridge steams in wooden bowls. Envoys carry tribute and return with calendars and silk. A winter campaign leaves new scars on a garrison wall and new care in the voice of the quartermaster. A spring festival still unfolds on schedule and proves that a nation must keep two tempos at once. At the river port, you watch barges unload salt and iron and pick up paper and oil. Farther down the coast, ships from a southern court bring printed books and fine tea. Monks returning from study abroad step onto the quay with scroll cases on their backs and a light in their eyes that blends certainty and humility. They climb stone steps to a quiet hall and teach how breath can turn a house full of sound into a room of clear air. Inside the palace, a ceremony welcomes officials who have passed exams. They bow before the king, then move into offices where ink will decide harvests, labor, borderlines, and rights for reign. The system insists on balance between arms and letters, yet the weight shifts. Officers chafe under scholars who undervalue the long night on cold walls. In 1170, soldiers in the capital lift weapons against their superiors. The order changes. For decades, generals govern, and the court learns to speak in shorter, harder sentences. Metal finds new purpose in quiet shops behind temples. Craftsmen cast movable type so that a page can be built in a frame, letter by letter, then changed for the next text. The work begins modestly. Over years, it grows bold enough to print a book of Zen teachings in 1377, a small volume whose pages still keep the smile of its maker in the scratch of each line. You lift it in your mind and feel how a tool the size of a seed can tilt the future. A question lingers in studios and kilns. Does the purest glaze owe its grace to a vein of clay, to a certain breath of flame, or to a master who taught a circle of students whose names never reached the record? The answer refuses a single path. Bowls that survive carry water light and cloud light together, and the mystery rides their surface like a faint wind. Night collects over Goguryeo. Lanterns swing under eaves. A watch beats a wooden clapper that gives 4 even notes, then rests. Beyond the last gate, fields sleep under frost, and beyond the fields, hill paths lead to the coast, where another power gathers horses and studies islands. You breathe in and let the taste of pine and ink settle. The city holds for now. Wheels will turn tomorrow. Bells will ring. The road over water will soon claim more of the story, and sails will test the patience of prayer. You feel winter gather along the estuary, where reeds turn pale and the tide lifts thin plates of ice against the mud. Riders come out of the north with felt hoods and low saddles, and the ground seems to still itself to hear their horses breathe. In the year 1232, the court leaves the river capital and crosses to Gangwa, an island crouched behind current and channel. Boats nose into the chop while soldiers haul stones for new walls. Lime stings the nose. Fresh timbers smell of sap. Catapults squat in courtyards like patient animals learning a trick. The island keeps the bell of a temple and the lamp of a shrine, and both lights stand their watch with the same steady concern. On the mainland, the sound of hooves passes like weather. Villages pull thatch tight and bank fires in clay ovens. Scribes bundle archives and lead them into hills. Monks carry bundles that are heavier than they look. In a valley far south, craftsmen lower planks of pear wood into iron baths, lift them shining, and begin to cut letters until the air fills with a dry music. Page after page of scripture rises from those blocks, a body of words meant to shield the country with clarity. Years pass under invasion and retreat, and the blades do not stop until the library feels as complete as a mountain that has finally told its shape to the sky. On Gangwa, winter mornings find the tide out and the mud flat gleaming like a dark mirror. Boys learn the safe paths between firm sand and silt. Soldiers practice with short bows and long spears. At night, signal fires blink along the coast from mast to hill. The court eats barley, rice when it can, and fish that carry the iodine breath of the cannel. A princess listens to the surf, while a tutor explains a character that means endurance, and another that means return. Lantern light lifts the grain of a table. The island learns how to stand without moving. The storms relent by treaty and by time. Another tie arrives that is both chain and bridge. A king travels to the far court and comes home a son-in-law of emperors, and the palace learns new titles and new greetings. Brides from the great steppe household enter Goguryeo with sable at the cuff and pearl at the ear, and rooms fill with accents that stretch vowels as if they were reaching toward open grass. Princes grow up between 2 centers. They ride small horses in the palace yard and learn 2 calendars and 2 ways to bow. The alliance bends the spine of the country without breaking it. Law still speaks with a local cadence. Market scales still come level in the open. Coastal worlds wake like a net shaken free of sleep. Shipwrights line ribs on cradles in the old yards, smear warm tar across seams, and hammer pegs that bite clean. The smell of pitch mixes with the sea. Captains study routes that run from Liaodong to Goryeo's bays and then down toward harbors where junks lie as thick as geese on winter water. The new order lifts barriers along roads from steppe to coast. Caravans travel with fewer pauses. A bale of cotton moves to a dye well. Indigo climbs a sleeve like dusk climbing a wall. Spices arrive in packets that perfume a storeroom with unknown orchards. In markets under the city walls, traders lay out blades of northern steel and cups from southern kilns. Ginseng roots twist like small animals sleeping. Paper lies cool as moonlight on the palm. A silk painted with a bodhisattva's face passes from hand to hand and lands in a shrine where candles burn with a sweet snuff smell. Musicians add a reed that sings from the edge of a desert and then quiet it so the old flutes do not feel crowded. A boy stares at blue glass that remembers a far furnace and thinks of rivers he has never seen. The coast learns new labors. In the 1270s, a guard force that once kept order in the capital refuses to accept the terms of peace. It breaks away, seizes war junks, and raises banners in the salt wind. The fleet anchors off Jindo, where tides turn like the breath of a sleeping animal. Later, it flees to Jeju, where black lava soil meets the sea. Earthwork walls rise in a hurry. Women carry stones in quiet lines. For 3 years, the rebels hold with stubborn grace until ships of the new alliance close from both compass points. Smoke drifts low over fields of millet. A last redoubt falls, and the island farm tracks grow empty. Shipyards do not go quiet. Orders arrive for hulls to carry troops toward islands beyond the horizon. Carpenters cut frames with the rhythm of men who have done this work since their youth. Ropes creak over capstans as if the harbor itself were breathing. Soldiers drill on the strand and then board to practice leaning into the pitch. Sailcloth snaps. Rice sacks thud into holds. A priest under a small awning reads a line to steady the crew. The fleet lifts, crosses to an outer chain of islands, and learns a coastline that curves like a blade. Storms visit and leave the beaches combed with stray planks and shredded cord, and the beaches keep their counsel. Courts reopen corridors. Officials ride to the great capital of the north with tribute lists and return with calendars marked for eclipses. Some remain as guests for years and learn the taste of northern wheat and the view from towers where pastures reach the edge of the eye. They send letters home about carpets with patterns of running deer and about lutes with a body shaped like a half moon. Along the same routes, merchants slip in behind envoys and carry back copper coins by the sack. A few bring stories of gardens where snow falls in a hush that sounds like the hush of bamboo forests at night. In chancelleries, a new script for duties and rights flows along old lines. Taxes come in grain and in cloth. Storehouses open in lean seasons. Mountain temples keep bells for dawn. City schools grind ink that smells like cold rain. In back lanes, painters stretch silk across wooden frames and lay down red and gold until a figure seems to rise from the cloth with a gaze that forgives. Those paintings travel to island shrines across the sea and hang there for centuries, their colors darkening like tea. Potters still listen to fire. The calm green of celadon softens as ash shifts and fuel changes, and inlaid clouds seem to drift slower than before. Some say the perfect glaze of earlier kilns depended on clay that a certain valley no longer yields, or on a breath of flame that young masters cannot quite hold. Others shape new bodies and edges with quiet confidence. A cup catches light like thin ice over willow roots and lets it go without a sound. Accounts from this age do not agree on size and measure. One clerk writes that the fleet numbered 1,000, and another writes more. One says a summer gale turned masts into forest drift. Another writes that battle broke the order first and the weather only finished it. A ledger claims that so many ships were built at a certain yard that the trees of 2 headlands wore a permanent lean from the cut. Another ledger from the same year gives a smaller count that feels more careful. The paper does not argue. It rests. By the 14th century, the rhythm begins to shift again. Power at the far court tightens and loosens like a tide. Princes born from 2 houses carry both bloods with the weight of a double oath. Some rule at home with skill. Some live long in northern cities where dust rises from hooves every afternoon. Inside Goguryeo, the scholars return to favor, then yield again, and the palace changes its temper the way a river changes its tone between flood and clear run. Night shadows lengthen over the port. Nets drip and make a soft ticking that sounds like rain on a paper roof. Lanterns tremble on the quay and draw twin ladders in the water. You taste salt and smoke and the bitterness of ginseng on the back of the tongue. Far inland, a bell rings on a hill above Heinsa, and the sound moves down slopes that have listened to it for more than a lifetime. Autonomy bends like bamboo in wind and then straightens in still air. The coast keeps its trade winds, the capital keeps its books. Between them, the country learns to survive by memory and by calm labor. You cross a low pass at dawn, and the city opens like a fan around a river. Peaks stand as guardians, Bugak to the north, Namsan to the south, and the walls run along their shoulders like calm hands. Banners lift over a new palace whose name tastes of brightness. Hanyang settles into your breath with the scent of ink, pine, rice steam, and wet stone. A dynasty begins to speak in a quiet register that prefers measured steps and clean courtyards. You watch carpenters set beams whose ends curl like the tails of swallows. The ridge lines meet the sky with a confidence that never turns severe. A drum keeps the hour inside the main gate. Beyond it, a broad court glows like a pond of dry light. Scribes carry tablets, officials move in robes that whisper, and a king takes a post on a dais that shows both modesty and command. The year is 1392, when the house changes, and soon after the capital rises here, in a grid that marries mountain breath to human law. Streets align with ridges and water, and shrines for earth and grain answer ancestral halls so that heaven, soil, and family stand in a single conversation. You follow a procession along an avenue toward a long, low sanctuary where stone steps hold the weight of memory. At Goguryeo, the air smells of cedar and oil. Musicians set jade chimes and bronze bells in careful rows. When the ritual begins, the first tone hangs like a pale moon, and dancers advance in squares that move as slowly as prayer. The tablets of the royal dead rest behind carved doors, and living sons bow until their foreheads greet the polished wood. The scene teaches the body a grammar: duty first, then mercy for the living, then tenderness for the past. Across the palace quarter, a hall of council gathers minds with a taste for order. Jiang Dojian writes plans that fit the present, as if the paper learned the shape of the time, and the city grows according to that plan. Law begins to take a firm body in volumes that judges can hold. By the late 15th century, the state code stacks clauses like small bricks that support markets and borders and the quiet economy of the household. A clerk turns a page, and the page answers with a sound like a thin bell. Schools send their light through alleys and across river towns. In Hangyo, near county seats, and in private academies under mountain ridges, boys bow to old words until their breaths find the cadence of the sages. Civil exams promise a path from study to office and make ink as coveted as silver. The road tests memory and judgment, and often favors those whose houses already carry books. A village still keeps its own teachers who read the seasons in willow buds, yet the pull of the capital grows. The country learns to place letters and plows in the same day. You step into a workshop where water taps a cup inside a tower, and the cup tips with a soft click that becomes time. A craftsman named Zhang Sil listens to that click as if it were rain on the heart. Bronze is cut and fitted until a clock breathes with the patience of a monk. Near the palace yard, a rain gauge waits for the first drop and writes the measure of clouds in a way that even a rushed official can understand. The king who favors these tools trusts knowledge that can be held in the hand and shared across the fields. In a room that keeps windows low and light gentle, scholars gather around their sovereign. The Hall of Worthies does not chase applause. It copies, edits, argues, and returns to the page with a steadiness that feels like rowing. Under that roof, the sounds of the language begin to find letters that belong to them alone. In 1446, a small book explains a new script so simple that a mother can learn it by firelight and teach it to a child before winter ends. Vowels draw lines of earth, man, and sky. Consonants show the shape of tongue and tooth and throat. The court chronicle names the king as the mind behind the work. Though letters travel best when many careful hands lift them, and a few lines in private notes hint that the circle around him shaped more than one curve and stroke. You take the new letters into the street and listen to them land. Merchants chalk prices with a sureness that frees them from borrowed scripts. Farmers copy a guide to sowing and weeding and use its plain speech to improve the rows. A song for cradle time appears in the script and carries the softness of breath. old poems still claim the high shelves, and scholars cling to classics that prove learning can be a gatekeeper. The script moves under that gate anyway. It does not hurry. It simply does not tire. Homes reflect the new balance between written order and quiet living. Floors glow warm from flues that carry smoke under stone. Eaves throw wide shades so summer can pass without harshness. In courtyards, jars rest on stands where soy and paste and pepper sleep under salt. White cloth dries on lines and turns the lane into a field of small clouds. A brush holder shaped like a crane keeps the scholar's desk at ease. A straw hat waits by the door for walks among beans, barley, and pears. The house seems to breathe. Art and devotion hold each other with careful hands. Temples lose some favor at court, yet continue to ring morning bells that flow down ravines like streams of bronze. Monks carve sutras with the same patience as before and carry them to mountain hermitages where pines lean close as listeners. Confucian rites guide weddings and funerals in towns and capitals. A widow ties her sash and lights a small cup of oil. Her son bows 3 times at the threshold and then returns to sweep the floor that his father once swept. The nation teaches itself to walk with a straight back and a gentle step. The palace annals spread year by year until they become an ocean of careful sentences. Each day receives lines for weather, harvest, appointment, and even the tone of a reply that soothed or sharpened. When a page tears, the copyist sighs as if a leaf fell from a living tree. The record keeps the names of those who were raised and those who were struck down in storms of faction. In quiet rooms, people still ask what moved those storms most. Some hear the pull of pure doctrine. Some hear the pulse of fear that haunts any court where favor shifts like light behind clouds. The pages allow both readings and never grow angry. On market days, you stand near a stone bridge and watch officials inspect weights and measures. A beam comes level and the crowd relaxes. A baker lifts rice cakes perfumed with pine needles. A drummer tries a new rhythm over the old pattern and smiles when it fits. Children trace letters in dust and name them with delight. The city knows that order does not mean silence. It means steady cadence, fair count, a road that meets the next road without quarrel. You climb to the city wall at evening. The mountains have turned blue and the river lies like silk set flat. Lamps have come on in study halls, and a father teaches a stroke to a son by guiding his wrist. In the palace, a bell calls the end of audience. The echo travels through the night until it touches a modest house where a woman copies a poem in the new script and places it by a jar of soy to dry in the warmth of the kitchen. The letters look like small boats moored in order along a brown shore. One fact holds like bedrock. A new dynasty raised Hanyang, codified rights, and gave the people letters that matched their breath. Yet city lines sometimes look like geomancy made into geometry, and sometimes they look like a soldier's sense of defense translated into streets, and the design keeps that double heart. The script bears a royal signature, and it also carries the fingerprints of craftsmen whose names rest in the spaces between official lines. The truth remains generous enough to include both. Night gathers and the sound of the river grows soft. A crane lifts from reeds and disappears into the color of the sky. Somewhere inside the walls, a stone chime answers a bell, and both sounds fade at the same pace. You feel the city settle into sleep with confidence in its codes and with room left for mercy. The breath of the land and the breath of the law keep time together, and you carry that rhythm forward as you step down from the wall. You stand at a southern harbor where dawn turns the water the color of old bronze. Nets drip and tick like small clocks. Far offshore sails climb the line of the world and grow teeth as they near. Drums answer from the pier. In the 5th month of 1592, ships pour into Busan, and the streets learn a new clang of steel. Smoke lays a hand over roofs. Rice paddies hiss as embers fall. People shoulder bundles and take the mountain tracks that run like veins toward the interior. You move along the road toward the capital, while hoofbeats carry orders that change with each hour. Gates open and close, then open again. Hanyang empties in a hurry, and the court flees north along a river that smells of rain. Monks ring bells in valleys already hidden by smoke. In a village, a woman ties a small silk pouch of rice at her child's waist, then lifts him so the bundle does not swing. The land narrows into passes where stone remembers the shape of older wars. The air tastes of ash and pine. At sea, a quieter strength wakes. Hulls of thick timber rest along a granite strand. Men check the seams with bare feet and listen for a whisper that would betray a leak. Drums speak one short phrase and oars lean together. You step onto the deck of a panoxion and feel its square shoulders hold the wave like a calm ox. A lower hull keeps ballast and food. The upper deck spreads wide so archers and gunners can work without crowding. Near the bow sits a low, hard shape with a roof like a carapace. It keeps iron spikes and small gun ports. The crew calls it the turtle, and they touch the wood as a sailor might touch a friend's shoulder before a hard day. The first encounter comes near Okpo. Sails fold like wings at rest and oars take a slow bite of water. The fleet glides into the harbor as if it were entering a room where people slept. A signal flag lifts. Drums change their phrase. Arrows rise like a flock leaving reeds, and the first cannon speaks from a wooden throat. Enemy masts tilt and then fade into a forest of smoke. You feel the ship beneath you keep a steady courage, moving only when commanded, never in panic. Before dusk, the crews eat rice and barley on deck and pass jars of water from hand to hand in silence that honors the men who will not eat again. Through summer, the pattern repeats and grows. Sacheon adds its scar to the enemy and strips fear from the crew. Near Hansando, the admiral arranges his ships in a curve that opens like a crane lifting its wings. When the enemy presses, the curve turns alive. Ships at the tips fold inward. The center takes one breath and holds. Cannon speak as if the sea had found a voice. Oarsmen keep a soft chant, and the fleet moves with a grace that looks like dance from a hill above the bay. The sea keeps this figure in its memory and brings it back whenever wind combs the water from the same direction. In towns away from the coast, people gather as militias without waiting for orders that may never arrive. Farmers lift spears carved from ash and iron. Blacksmiths fit bands to clubs until they feel heavy and sure. Monks leave their sutras on clean, low tables and carry staffs along roads where dust hangs as if it did not know how to fall. The army gathers again with help from a northern ally whose banners move like wheat in wind. Cities lost in one season are taken back in the next. Pyongyang learns 2 triumphs and 2 griefs within a single year, and its stones keep every footprint without choosing a favorite. The enemy returns in 1597, and the court shakes like a jar set on a rough table. The admiral who has kept the coast clear finds himself in disgrace for a brief and bitter interval. When he returns, he counts 12 sound hulls. The strait at Myeongyang runs like a river, even when the tide is calm, and its current speaks a language older than law. You stand near the stern and listen to that water climb and fall in stone throats under the keel. Signals lift. Drums answer with a low insistence. The fleet anchors in the current and releases anchor at a word, letting the tide turn ships into weapons. Hulls slip past one another with inches to spare. Cannon fire echoes from the cliffs and returns as if the hills themselves offered aid. The day closes with broken masts riding the eddies like winter trees and with the 12 still afloat. The strait grows quiet and keeps a confidence that you will not break. A journal rests in the flagship cabin. Lines enter it after dark by the light of a small lamp. The ink smells of smoke and salt. The writing keeps the weather, the mood of the men, the state of the powder, the balance of the stores, and the sorrow that cannot be spoken aloud on deck. Pages wrinkle at the edges, as if the sea breathed through the paper. You see how steadiness grows when a person tells the truth to the page and then closes the cover. Autumn of 1598 brings a last meeting near Noryang, where currents meet like 2 tempers that have argued too long. Sails that have learned the water better than the men above them begin to guess each next motion more quickly than thought. In the smoke, you hear a command in a voice that has guided storms and calmed fear. The fleet pulls close. Fires climb masts and then drop into dark. When the battle ends, a silence falls that is not celebration. A leader lies still, and the crews lower their heads where they stand. Lanterns make seas of light on planks scrubbed smooth by years of bare feet. The night closes with oars that move in one slow stroke, then rest. Temples burned in the hills return to their bells, though many remain only foundations where moss writes its own script. Villages lost their shape and then found it again by watching where smoke rose at mealtime. In markets, smiths melt broken blades into spades. Weavers pull threads from charred bundles and tie them to new skeins. Children skip rope with lengths cut from worn mooring lines. The country relearns how to count a day by work rather than by alarm. A dragonhead once rode at the bow of a turtle ship. Some say it breathed smoke that hid approach, and others say fire leapt from its mouth when a mix of oil and powder met a spark. A few older men from a coastal parish claim the head held a simple tube for a single loud shot that frightened more than it harmed. The water near the old battlefields keeps its face perfectly smooth when the wind is down, and the answer rests there as securely as a coin in a deep bowl. You visit a stone upon which men carved the names of donors who rebuilt bridges after the storms. The stones carry characters cut with uneven hands, proof that common people gave as much pride as they gave coin. You cross one bridge and feel the boards loosen your step. The river moves beneath with a strength that forgives. On a hillside, a shrine honors a general whose right hand learned to write calmly even when the deck pitched. A small sailor's drum hangs beside the altar. When a child taps it with a finger, the sound is so soft that it passes through the skin rather than the air. Winter returns at last without alarms. The sea shows only fishing boats. Lanterns stand like warm fruit in house windows along the strand. In a cove where wreckage once drifted, kelp lifts and settles in a patient breath. The people discover that resilience does not speak loudly. It lifts water in jars, mends nets with twine saved in a clay pot, warms floors, and greets neighbors with a bow that holds for one quiet beat. You breathe in the iodine and smoke and clean frost, and you carry forward the calm that was won on water and carried back to land. You enter a capital that keeps its lanterns low. Gates close early, and the watch strikes the wooden block with a hollow comfort that sounds like rain on a board. Alley shutters breathe cedar and oil. In the palace quarter, a father of the king holds council with men who prefer solid rules to quick fashion. He trims court expense, rebuilds shrines for state rights, cleans ranks, and allows little that looks like novelty. His measures give the city a straight back. They also narrow windows that once let fresh air in. Along the western river, a steamer noses up the current, and the banks grow very quiet. On a late summer day in 1866, the hull grinds a shoal near Pyongyang, and smoke curls above willows. Boats gather with poles and ropes. Words pass between deck and shore that do not meet in the middle. Fire takes the rigging. The river keeps what it keeps and gives nothing back quickly. Across the same year, another fleet shows white sails in the tidal lanes near Ganghwa. The tide runs like a slow muscle under the hulls. Cannon speak from islands and from low batteries. A church bell in a coastal village rings for evening, and birds rise to the sound as if it were meant for them alone. A name for the country begins to travel in foreign papers, a name that calls it a hermit. The word is not the one the people use for themselves, yet it lands because walls feel safer than doors when cold wind tests the latch. In the court, defenses grow taller. In the markets, lives go on with a steadier beat. Soy jars breathe in courtyards. Paper windows glow like rice milk at dusk. Letters scratch in the Hall of Worthies that now works without the old brightness but still moves the hand with care. On Ganghwa again, the year becomes 1871, and ships arrive under a new flag that carries stars in a field the color of late water. Oars bite. Marines land. The fort stones absorb heat and noise and hold their line until powder gives way. On the parapet, a soldier lifts a banner with a tiger painted in bold strokes that show the wrist of a confident artist. He stands long enough to teach a lesson about posture. Then the flag finds the ground and rests. The river runs indifferent, green, and exact. Treaties arrive like hard rain in 1876. The ink opens 3 ports on the coast. Pilots learn how to guide foreign keels over local sandbars. Warehouses rise on pilings. A telegraph house with a thin iron wire running toward the horizon sets a new pitch into the air. Customs men count crates of cotton and kerosene, while dock boys taste sugar that feels like clean snow on the tongue. The ports sound like 2 alphabets recited at once. A missionary lifts a hymn in a rented hall, and a Confucian teacher across town corrects the stroke of a boy who holds his brush too low. The 2 sounds do not erase each other. They hover on different floors of the same house. Storms visit the city as well as the coast. Summer of 1882 puts restless soldiers in the street. Old pay is late. New uniforms do not fit old pride. The palace shudders as courtyards fill and the torch smoke climbs the rafters. Order returns with foreign guards and firm hands. 2 years later, a group of young officials rushes a winter night with big plans for swift reform, and the night proves less willing than their courage. Papers burn on a desk where the ink was barely dry. Survivors go abroad with careful silence and return years later with fewer illusions and deeper skill. In villages of the Southwest, a song flows that does not bend easily to court or shrine. It uses plain words that feel like warm broth. It calls the Sky Lord by a name that promises closeness and asks the poor to stand with dignity. Farmers tie white bands at the head and gather like small rivers that find one stream. The year is 1894, when the song becomes a march. Columns move over ridges that keep persimmon groves on their shoulders. They carry staffs and spears and the conviction that hunger should not be a habit. The court calls for help, first from an old ally beyond the river, then finds another army on the road from the islands. The fields that once held barley now hold tents. The stream goes quiet, then scatters into separate ditches that still carry the same water. Reform follows war, the way a hush follows thunder. Officials frame the Gabo measures so quickly that the dust does not settle on desks. The law clears ranks that once fixed birth into destiny. The old bondage that tied servants to houses loses its teeth. Top knots fall in barbershops that smell of soap and hesitation. New ministries learn the weight of calendars and rail plans. A police whistle enters the soundscape of the capital like a new kind of bird. Mothers teach letters to daughters with more confidence now that the court has said learning belongs to all. A lamplighter touches his pole to a glass globe, and a circle of gold appears on the stones that used to rely only on the moon. Faith communities breathe through these changes with uneven lungs. Catholic chapels rise in lanes that once knew only shrines and academies. Protestants share primers and teach the new script to adults who never had time for study. A printing press thumps in a back room where windows stay open for the smell of ink. In the hills, monasteries ring bells at dawn and carry on with sutras that know how to endure without applause. A grandmother spreads straw mats for autumn beans and chants a line that her own grandmother used when the jar was low. The country learns to keep 2 lamps lit and to walk without letting the flames quarrel. You cross a fort near the coast that once faced foreign guns and now faces gulls that beg for fish. The embrasures look out over flats where women in wide hats rake clams, their baskets filling with a sound like light rain. The stones keep both memories without choosing between them. On a street near the South Gate, a calligrapher hangs a sign that sets old characters in a style taught by a teacher who loved calm more than flourish. Next door, a shopkeeper chalks Hangul prices with a flourish, learned from his daughter. The 2 scripts look like 2 brothers who have learned to share a table. Not every page rests flat. The court feels a presence that moves behind screens and gardens. Some remember the Queen's caution toward new power from the islands and her leaning toward Northern Council. Some remember the old regent's love of hard lines and his distrust of missionaries and machines. The house breathes both tempers, and servants learn to step with care. On a frosty morning, rumors cross paths like stray dogs. Before long, the palace will know nights that do not end with the clack of a watchman's block. For now, the perfume of pine oil still lifts from the floors, and the guard still bows in the old cadence. A small object in a museum case holds a quiet key to these currents. It is a casting of a telegraph insulator from an early line. Pale ceramic with a glaze like thin milk, resting near a wooden ruler used by a magistrate who measured fields by footsteps. The 2 tools share the same shelf, and they share a purpose. They help people agree on distance and time. One works by wire, the other by stride. The country tests both without giving up its habit of looking first at the sky and the ridge before deciding when to sow and when to cut. The record of these years resists a single mood. Some diaries praise the energy of traders who brought kerosene that made evening work kinder to the eyes. Other notes mourn the loss of deep winter nights when the village had only firelight and 1 drum. Letters from the North Coast dwell on gunboats that mistook silence for consent. Letters from the capital savor the cleanliness of new uniforms and the fairness of a revised code. The truth will not hold still under 1 hand. It asks for 2 hands and sometimes 4. At evening, you climb Namsan and look down on a city that now wears both shadow and spark. Street lamps draw beads of light along the avenues. Temple roofs hold night like cups. A school bell rings and does not startle anyone. Somewhere, a printing press knocks out a primer in the script that a wise king once gave to his people. Somewhere else, a clerk copies an edict in characters that have guided duty for centuries. Between those sounds, the river pulls a ribbon of dark toward the sea. You breathe deep and taste ink, resin, coal, and autumn pear. The walls keep their calm curve along the ridge. The gates accept the new traffic without losing their old height. A chill carries down from the mountain, and the city lifts its collars. The story tightens as if a knot were being drawn slowly and precisely. You feel the pull, and you carry forward the stillness needed to face it. You step into a garden where frost edges chrysanthemum leaves, and palace walls return the first light like pale bone. Footsteps once hurried over this gravel at an hour when lamps still smoked. A queen disappeared into the dark of inner chambers, and morning found the courtyards quieter than they had ever been. Servants washed the stones until rings of water dried in the sun. Within 2 winters, the court raises its eyes and proclaims a new dignity. Drums answer from every gate. Banners with a coiled dragon unroll over squares. At Wangudan, an altar of granite receives wine, while trumpets hold notes that seem to straighten spines. The realm takes the name Great Han, and calendars learn a new era. Copper wires climb poles, and a bell on a streetcar rings as metal wheels draw thin songs along new rails. Red brick schools rise above lanes where ginkgo leaves collect. Doctors teach in rooms that smell of carbolic and ink. In a print shop, a plate takes ink, paper meets it, and a sheet rises shining like a fresh pond. Court robes still sweep polished floors even as telephones begin to sing across districts. Pressure that once came by river now comes by timetable. A treaty places a hand on the government in 1905, gentle in tone and hard in effect. An office of the new guardian rises above the capital like a second mountain. The old army bows, then in 1907 lays down rifles in a yard where dust lifts like smoke. Some soldiers break ranks and walk to hills where pine smells of resin and rain. Farmers join them, and monks bring rice in baskets tied with straw. On a winter platform far to the north, a man lifts his hand. Station clocks read a foreign hour. Breath hangs white between 2 figures whose names will never share a page in peace. Pistols speak, and the snow keeps its counsel. In the capital, doors close like shutters against wind. In 1910, the flag with the red and blue circle folds, and a different sun rises above the gates. Registers open on rough desks in village offices. Surveyors pace fields with chains that sing a dry metallic music. Stones take paint and beams take chalk, and paddies that once passed by story now pass by number. Rails run bright along river and coast, and a whistle at noon teaches valleys a new way to tell time. The city speaks 2 tempers at once. Officials write in a clean hand that asks for obedience. Merchants learn prices that drift with distant markets. At the same hour, a grandmother salts cabbage in a jar that sits warm on brick and hums like a beehive. She sings the lullaby her mother sang and smooths a blanket the color of early pears. The house endures with floors that stay warm and low tables that invite the body to fold and rest. A spring day gathers like a long-held breath. White garments fill streets and parks. Paper flags with the red and blue circle bloom in hands. A declaration read in a hall becomes wind in avenues and alleys. Voices rise with the single word that asks for blessing. Then hooves answer on stone, leather creaks, and the hard stare of new rule returns. People fall, rise, fall again. The echo does not leave. It lodges in notebooks and ribs and songs. Offices change tone the way a river shifts channels. One year brings velvet words, another iron. Schools open in numbers the countryside has never seen. The alphabet, born in a wise king's study, appears on primers, disappears from public signs, then hides in drawers. A radio flickers in a tea house, and the song carries an accent from across the sea. Yet poets find rooms where the pen keeps its honesty. A young man copies verses by lamplight and folds them into his sleeve. Smokestacks rise over a port where cranes outnumber herons. Cotton turns in frames that clatter until the floor shivers. Coal meets the air with the smell of iron and damp. Rice leaves the countryside in sacks stenciled with numbers. A siren ends sleep for thousands at the same minute. The noon train learns to harmonize with it. Shrines on hills receive lines of students in dark coats who bow because attendance commands it. Names change on forms and then change again, and some keep 2 sets of letters in pockets the way a person keeps 2 small stones to weigh a memory. Young men leave for mines and mills beyond mountains and sea. Some return with a far winter in their eyes. Others send letters pressed flat and faint of scent. In alleys near the market, a few meet and speak of a government that breathes above a Shanghai lane. Couriers move between ports and farms with folded papers under linen. A teacher with tired hands tells pupils that the first line of the alphabet draws earth, man, and sky into one breath. In farmhouses beyond the border and in dormitories beside a northern river, names are chosen that point toward a freedom whose outline keeps shifting in fog. Your feet find a small museum where the flag of the short-lived empire hangs beside the banner raised in the spring crowds. A tarnished rail spike sits on a shelf near a child's slate. The 2 remember many hands. One carries speed, the other carries words. In another case, a lacquered hairpin rests beside a ration ticket. Both belong to the same woman, and both tell the story of dignity when choice grew narrow. A question walks beside you as dusk settles. Could the rails and wires have served a different future if time had granted the empire another decade and kinder neighbors? Or did the same steel always intend the mills that rose where marsh once breathed? The land does not answer. It lets crickets speak from ditches and lets smoke climb from kitchen chimneys. It asks you to keep walking. Night deepens. Curfew drums tap softly and streets grow hollow. Behind shutters, the new script rustles as a child reads to a grandmother who pretends to sleep. Somewhere a poet breaks a pencil and places the 2 pieces like chopsticks beside an empty bowl. Somewhere a constable checks a watch whose tick belongs to a factory clock. The moon looks untroubled over city and field, and you feel a quiet that is not peace but endurance. It holds the country together until another morning approaches. You wake into a summer morning that tastes of metal and jasmine. Radios crackle. A voice breaks and steadies. Hands lift cloth that keeps a red and blue circle in balance, and the white field catches the light like milk. People run into streets where pine smoke hangs thin over tile. They shout until their throats rasp. They cry and laugh and sing an old tune that moves like a river under the ribs. The year is 1945, and the wind carries the word liberation as if it were a bell note that finally found the right air. Trains begin to arrive from the north with doors open and faces crowded at every window. In stations, coolies stop their carts and bow to grandmothers who have not bowed in public for a long time. That night, a lantern burns beside a bowl of rice set for ancestors who endured hunger and exile. A boy writes his name with the home script, and the letters look as shy as new calves. Relief and astonishment touch everything. Confusion arrives with the same speed. Orders change, papers change, uniforms change. A line is drawn across maps at the 38th latitude by hands that were tired and well-meaning and far away. The ink dries, and the peninsula begins to live as 2 rooms that share one roof. In towns on both sides, people gather in halls that smell of ink and straw and try to teach order to the morning. Some choose village committees and speak of land and bread. Others choose councils that carry old books and think of duty and rank. Flags rise in both rooms, and they both claim the story. The air grows tighter with each reply across the new line. In 1948, the Southern Room declares a republic in August, light that feels almost clean. In that same season, the Northern Room declares its own state in September, air that tastes of coal and apple. 2 capitals begin to count hours. A woman in white folds laundry and listens to 2 anthems as if they were brothers who no longer share a meal. Dawn in 1950 opens with the smell of cordite near a river that once learned to carry carp and winter ice. Columns of men move south, and the ground trembles. Roads fill with carts and mattresses and infants tied to backs. On the bridge over the Han, people press forward until the boards groan. In alleys, the shutters shake as nearby fire finds its mark. In the capital, the sound of boots comes like surf up a stone street. You walk out with those who leave and keep to the shade where plane trees make torn circles on dust. The war writes its own geography. In the far south, a line of earth and sand hardens into a crescent that holds. The heat is a weight on the shoulders. Cicadas drill the air. Oars creak in slow rhythm as ferries pull across a brown river with crates of grain and crates of shells. Far away, the tide turns cold over a walled harbor of mud and rock and narrow channels that look unusable. In September, ships enter those channels with a surgeon's patience, and Marines climb a seawall wet as a freshly cut stone. The landing at Incheon opens like a door you thought was part of the wall. Dust rises again in the capital when the city comes back into its own hands, and people lift the circle flag with tears that make little mirrors on their cheeks. The front surges. Fields that yielded beans now receive the weight of boots marching north until frost bites and the breath of men hangs low and blue. In mountains near a reservoir, the cold grows so exact that water turns to glass in a cup. Snow reports each step and each mistake. Bugles sound from ridges where dark coats move in files that seem to rise out of pine itself. Friend and stranger tangle in valleys and on roads. Towns change hands. Refugees crowd a dock at Hungnam, where ships pull so many from the ice rim that a single freighter carries a city's worth of hope into open water. Mothers wrap babies in quilts and press them to chests that are already bruised by the cold. A deck smells of diesel and sea and prayer. Winter loosens. The fight knits the land into trenches and outposts with names that insist on the human body. Ridges with bare shoulders, hills that test the heart. The guns pound and then go still and then begin again. Rain slows the air to a gray cloth. For 2 years, the war argues over yards and memories. On summer nights, flares climb and float and fall, and their green light turns a valley into a drowned theater. Somewhere behind the lines, a unit boils barley until the steam smells faintly of sweetness, and a private writes a letter that never mentions fear, but talks for a long time about the sound of frogs. At last, the tables in a village of plank walls and mud paths receive pages thick enough to bear signatures. On July 27 of 1953, pens lift. The guns fold into a silence that feels nervous and new. The armistice tightens along a corridor of hills and paddies and streams that runs like an old scar that has learned a fresh ache. The demarcation line settles into a zone that no one tills and no one builds upon. Wire rolls out in delicate snarls. Guard posts stare at one another over low grasses. Cranes return to flat water where soldiers do not step. Deer move at dusk with quiet ankles, and their breath steams from nostrils like offerings. Families stand on platforms and try to read the faces of other families beyond the line. Women keep photographs in cloth wraps and rub them with thumbs until the paper shines. A girl learns to sleep with her father's name like a stone under her pillow. On both sides, schools open. Drills go on. Markets multiply. Radio tunes divide evenings into 2 songs. Sundays bring similar prayers in different rooms. Ancestors listen to incense smoke that climbs with the same grace on both sides of wire. One truth sits like bedrock under the feet. The war froze a hope for reunion and kept it inside guarded fences, and yet it did not erase the habit of blessing the table before the meal and bowing to mountains at the turn of the year. Another truth refuses a single room. Some say the decision to cross the line ripened in one mind in a hall with portraits and maps. Some say the choice congealed in a conversation far away and then traveled by wire. The night that came before the first shots will not offer only one story. It keeps its door ajar and lets the future stand there and listen. You return to the river at evening where reeds hide herons and the surface keeps a color like pewter. Children toss flat stones and watch them kiss the skin of water. A grandmother lifts a kettle and pours barley tea into bowls that warm the hands. Steam carries the smell of roasted grain and the memory of kitchens from every province. Across the valley, a loudspeaker sends a tune into the dusk, and someone on the opposite bank answers with another tune. The 2 melodies pass through one another without harm and travel away into hills that darken and then rest. Night settles over the wire. Fireflies flash in grass that used to host men with rifles. A hill that kept a name born of pain turns gentle as its pines thicken. Somewhere a soldier on watch hums Orirang so softly that only his own breath can hear it. The land accepts the song the way it accepts mist. You listen until your chest finds a slower measure. You carry forward the quiet that can live even beside fences and floodlights. You cross a river that now shines with bridges like strings on an instrument, and the current carries the smell of wet steel and rice steam. Cranes write tall letters against the sky. The city that once crouched under sirens stands upright among towers that catch the sun and return it in coins of light. You walk along the Han at morning and hear a busy grace, scooters humming, sellers calling, office shoes tapping stone with a tempo that suggests a future arriving on time. The years thicken with work. In the early 1960s, a stern officer takes the helm, and the country chooses plans that divide time into clean blocks. Roads stretch over rice land. An expressway runs from the capital to the southern coast and teaches distance to yield. On a windy shore, a steel mill rises, where only salt once gathered, and furnaces turn red ore until the air rings like a bell. Shipyards launch hulls that learn every ocean. Buses carry names from islands and hills toward factory gates that open before dawn. Factories add their breath to the day. Whistles rise with morning and let go at dusk. Young men and women share dorm rooms that smell of soap and warm rice. They send money in thin envelopes to villages where grandparents tend jars in courtyards heated by hidden flues. In evening classes, students copy letters until their wrists ache, then copy a little more. Family tables hold rice, soup, and a dish of seasoned greens. On festival days, a sleeve of silk comes out of a chest and turns a lane into a soft river of color. Politics keeps a hard gait. A spring in 1960 returns people to the streets with candles and songs, and a president bows to that sound and leaves. Another autumn, at the end of 1979, removes a ruler whose authority seemed carved in oak, and the palace falls into a hush that feels like snow. The next year, soldiers move in a southern city where magnolia petals drift through alleys while rifles crack near the gates. Mothers keep portraits wrapped in cloth. Fathers fold grief into labor that does not forget. By the late 1980s, the city breathes differently. Crowds press forward with banners that ask for a voice that feels true, and the streets answer with a promise that holds. That summer, athletes from many nations march into a stadium where drums turn the air bright and the world looks closer. Subways find their full rhythm. Cafes appear where students read poems before class, and engineers draw circuits after dark. Palaces light their eaves so stone and timber can rest without seeming to fade from memory. The rhythm falters in 1997. Traders watch numbers fall like early hail that bruises fruit while it is still on the branch. Offices grow quiet, factories slow. Men in neat coats carry boxes down stairwells. In homes, people gather their gold and offer it to the mint so the country may stand straighter. The gesture shines more than metal and becomes a story that parents tell children who wear school uniforms and carry the search for skill like a small fire in the pocket. Recovery arrives with new tools. Antennas climb rooftops. Cables find basements. A generation that learned to bow at the gate also learns to tap keys without fear. Small rooms fill with glow and with hope. Music studios train voices and steps until they move with the precision of a watch. A song that begins in a practice room crosses one sea, then another. Films lean into craft and find festivals ready to listen. A stadium lights emerald grass for a summer of shared joy in 2002, and the chorus of cheers travels along river and alley as if it had always lived there. North of the line, a different timepiece sets the hour. Statues stand tall over squares where winter gives faces a mineral calm. Cooperative farms measure the day by loudspeakers and by seasons that do not always keep their promises. In the 1990s, hunger travels the countryside and leaves a mark on shoulders and eyes. Families barter pots for potatoes. Trains stop on open tracks and hold their breath. The years learn two names, one spoken by officials who ask for patience, and another murmured at night that remembers thin bowls and long walks. Leaders turn, and the capital keeps its stiff posture. Scientists lift rockets on clear mornings, and an orange flower opens against the sky. The world counts. Reports speak of a device tested in a northern mountain in 2006, and more tests follow in years that feel like winter even in summer. Talks open, stall, then open again. A factory park near the line begins as an experiment in shared labor and later closes its gates and waits. Soldiers at guard posts study the far side without turning their heads, learning the shapes of trees as if they were faces. South of the wire, people practice the art of meeting. In 2000, a convoy crosses to a northern capital, and a room opens for family photographs that waited half a lifetime. In 2018, leaders step onto a low slab at the border and trade a few quiet words while cameras keep their distance. The moment does not solve anything by itself. It becomes a small lantern set on a wall where people pass each day. Sometimes the flame flickers. It does not go out. The city by the Han continues to find rooms for skill. A phone in your palm holds maps, music, and a library that would have filled a palace. Night markets cook batter into cakes that steam in the cold and melt on the tongue. Glass towers mirror old gates, where drummers in bright robes keep the cadence of the watch. A grandmother in a hanbok smiles beside a granddaughter whose sneakers blink with tiny diodes. The two bow at the same altar with the same slow grace. The bow remains the spine of the culture, even as lights multiply. People still wonder which ingredient mattered most in the long ascent. Some point to land passed from landlord to tenant, so that hands owned the soil they warmed. Some point to schools that kept lamps on past midnight. Some point to outside aid that bought time. Some point to companies that learned to turn a small shop into a field of factories. The answer moves like light on water, never stopping at one ripple, and the river keeps flowing. What endures is the habit of steady labor and the old pledge to honor parents and keep faith at the table. At evening, you return to the bank where reeds scratch softly in the breeze. Towers turn on their galaxies of windows. Far away, the line in the hills remains, a thin idea kept by wire and watch. Cranes nest in the quiet zone. Foxes hunt. Grasses bend. In the city below, a choir rehearses in a church where the roof smells of pine. Across town, a tea room serves barley brew in plain cups. A bell rings from a temple above the highway. The notes do not argue. They take turns and they bless the air. The peninsula holds both speed and stillness. It keeps wilderness in a scar that became a sanctuary and keeps ambition in a street that never sleeps. It keeps family tables and soccer fields and pillared halls that carry the names of kings. You breathe with it and feel how memory and invention can sit at one table without quarrel. Night gathers and does not press. The future waits like a train that will arrive when it should. You carry the calm forward to the last turn in the road. You walk along an overlook where fog softens fences and the land below turns into a green ribbon that no plow or shoe disturbs. Reeds sway like quiet breath. Red-crowned cranes settle on mudflats with the poise of old dancers. Water deer nibble at the margin of a stream that forgets for a moment to be a border. The corridor holds a hush made by decades of watch and by the accident of peace that never quite became peace. You listen until your own pulse matches the slow steps of the birds. A station stands nearby with glass that keeps the morning pale. Dorasan waits with tracks that reach toward hills and then stop with a shy reluctance. The boards name distances to northern cities as if a timetable could summon an hour. A clerk dusts a counter that has not stamped a ticket to the far side in years. A sign declares the hope that this is the first station toward reunion rather than the last from the south. You trace a finger along the metal rail and feel how steel can hold patience without rusting the soul. Families gather in a hall at the edge of mountains and open envelopes that have been guarded like small altars. Faces meet that once shared rice and laughter before war turned the table into two tables. Hands touch shoulders and cheeks with the careful pressure used for newborns. A woman tells a son what his father liked to eat and how he walked home from the market with one shoe squeaking. When the time ends, guards look at shoes rather than faces, and people walk backward so eyes can stay joined a little longer. Photographs slide into pockets that will be opened again at night. Both rooms on the peninsula learn how to speak to the world with separate microphones and sometimes with a single cord. In 1991, two flags rise on the same day by the East River, while the wind gives equal attention to both. In 2000, a motorcade crosses through pines for a first summit, and a door opens to new meetings that feel like rain after months of glare. In 2018, two leaders step to a concrete seam, set shoes on the far side for a heartbeat, and then sit together on low chairs. The scene teaches the chest a slower way to breathe, even when the next season grows less friendly. Culture walks past the wire without asking permission. A song born in a basement studio learns to circle stadiums on 3 continents. Dramas cross oceans and turn living rooms into classrooms where old values wear modern jackets. A film about houses and hunger wins a golden prize in a far city, and people who have never seen Seoul learn to say its name with care. In a square near a river, fans lift small lamps that glow like gentle constellations, and a grandmother in a silk jacket watches her granddaughter sing in a language that belongs to both kitchen and stage. Work continues beneath the noise. Chips are cut and polished in clean rooms where air moves like water through silk. Phones learn to hold poems and ledgers and family shrines in one bright rectangle. Trains slide out of stations and carry their hum across fields where scarecrows hold still in hats as wide as plates. A young woman at a launch site tightens her gloves and climbs into a capsule that smells of metal and cotton. In 2008, a compatriot rides a rocket and carries a taste of home sealed in neat packets. The universe briefly touches a kitchen shelf and then returns the favor by letting stars feel close. Homes keep what speed cannot replace. Kimchi sleeps under lids that fit a jar like a good vow. On Chuseok, families bow before tablets that remember names and journeys. The new script appears on festival posters and on notes taped to refrigerators. Church bells ring in one quarter, and temple bells answer from a hill, each sound traveling through air that is large enough for both. In markets, a vendor wraps honey cakes for a child and adds one more without counting money. The old rule of courtesy still knows how to make the day taste better. Questions remain and do not trouble the night. No one can say which hour will welcome the first freight train to pass through Dorasan and into the north as if the track had never been interrupted. No one can say which melody will play from a phone on that train. Arirang sometimes claims a western pass as its cradle and sometimes claims an eastern coast. Both stories live because the tune lives wherever a breath can find it. The green corridor may become a park where families eat rice balls on grass that once lifted censers. It may remain a thin silence where cranes rehearse patience for another generation. The future holds its cards without malice. You stand in a city that never stops polishing windows, and then you look toward hills that never stop growing pines. Memory sits at the same table as ambition and passes the salt with a smile that belongs to both. The peninsula keeps both rooms tidy in different ways and continues to teach the world how endurance can learn to sing. Night settles over the river and over the wire with equal gentleness. In one home, a child copies letters. In another, a soldier pours tea. You breathe with them both and carry forward a vision that waits without losing heart. Night moves in on soft feet and the edges of things blur until roofs and trees and distant ridges share one quiet color. Street lamps lift patient halos above lanes that still remember hooves and handcarts. A courtyard cools. The lid of a jar clicks as it settles, and the scent of garlic and clean stone drifts into the air. Somewhere a bell gives one low note, then rests. Somewhere a wooden clapper answers with 4 small taps and lets silence expand again like a calm lake after a skipped stone. Gardens breathe their old breath. Ferns lean into shadows. A worn step shows the shine of many generations and keeps that warmth even when the air turns thin. Paper doors glow with a hush that feels like milk, and a sleeve brushes the lintel with a sound almost too soft to hear. Crickets stitch the dark with an even thread. Ponds turn to black mirrors that carry one slow cloud and the memory of cranes. A folded quilt waits on a low bed that remembers the weight of grandparents and the first nights of infants who long ago learned to sleep to the rhythm of rain. You lie back and let the world loosen. The lights of towers fade into a far constellation, then into a gentle nothing. Paths across mountains close their eyes and the sea leaves only a breath against stones. Ancestors who worked rice and ink and iron set a calm hand on your shoulder. The house keeps its steady heart. The land keeps its long promise. Your own breath finds that shore and rests there, unhurried, untroubled, held. And now you may drift into dreams of history. End of script. Sweet dreams.